The calligraphy 1 and 2 markers, and obviously the calligraphy pen 1, 2, and 3 markers, as well as the Posterman markers in 15, 30, and 50, can all be used to write the same types of letter forms at different sizes. There are a number of things that you need to be aware of before you start writing, and that is how the tip actually works. So I'm only going to use the calligraphy 1 marker, the 5. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sheets of paper, roughly about 5 sheets, and I'm going to make a couching base. So this couching base is just to create a flat surface, because of course if you're working on a wooden desk, you might have some ridges based on the grain of the wood. So by putting a few sheets down, you have a little interleaving layer. I've ruled some lines up, and I'm just going to use the baseline. So I'm using this as a rough guide sheet. And I'm putting this underneath here. Like so. So you can just about see the lines. The marker has a very specific shape. It has 2 edges on the long side, here and here. And it has 2 edges on the short side. So the mark essentially looks like this. So we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 are the same, and 3 and 4 are the same. They are smaller than the edges of 1 and 2. What I normally do when I'm writing is I pick the marker up, make a decision which side I'm going to work on, and then I put a little mark, like so, on the top of the curve of the marker. So that tells me that I'm actually writing with the underside, the opposite side to the mark. This is a really important consideration because I'm just going to roughly write a letter. You put the marker down, you come back to it, and you pick it up, and if there's no mark, you might flip it over. So you're using both sides, both edges of the marker. I find this is particularly helpful because it means that you'll only use this side until you feel that you want an absolutely sharper edge, because obviously it's felt. One of the issues with felt is people press really hard and it can soften the edge of the nib so it's not super sharp. And then once you get to the point where you've worn away that side of the nib, you can turn the marker over and write on the other side. So that's a really important tip for understanding how to use these markers and how to get more out of the markers. The other thing we need to discuss is the hold of the marker. As you can see here, the marker has edges, which means when it comes to writing with it, you want to be on an edge rather than on the top. So if you're going to work on an edge of the marker, you have to understand how to hold the tool properly. Holding the tool like this doesn't help because it's very difficult to keep the flat on the edge, or rather the full edge on the page, because you have a tendency of pressing on this side. Ideally, you want to hold the tool like this between the 3 fingers without the thumb over the top of the tool. If you have the thumb over the top of the tool, it creates instability in the tool. By holding the tool where you can see between it, it allows you to do much more because you can roll the tool between your fingers. You can have a flat edge, twist, turn and roll. or you can roll and roll. That's very difficult to do if you're holding the marker like this, because it'll cause the edge to lift off the page. Some of the other considerations are, when you're starting to use these markers, rest the marker gently on the page and wait. Wait until you can feel the width of the marker. Then you want to make a downstroke slowly, and that allows full deposition of ink on either side of the marker. So notice how solid the top and the bottom lines are, and the sides. So I've put the marker down, I've stopped, I've waited, I've pulled the marker towards myself, gotten to the baseline, and I've stopped and waited and lifted up and in. Now these are some of the problems you might experience. The marker might lift whilst you're trying to write on one or the other side. It might not start on the line, or it might not finish on the line. That's because you're lifting too quickly rather than getting to the end of the line and stopping, or you're moving the tool without actually resting it on the place that you want it to start. You want a definitive stroke. And that's basically, your sort of underlying structure for how to use the markers. Now we're also going to look at how to produce a guideline. So we have a line, and the guidelines for the letters are based on the letter forms you're planning to use and the size of the nib. The size of the nib is directly proportional to the size of the letter. Different calligraphic scripts using a broad edge nib have different nib width sizes. So a nib width is obviously the width of the nib. So we make a nib ladder, and the way to do that is we produce a little square like so. Notice I've made the square and I've stopped and I've lifted, so we have a nice sharp edge. Take the corner, the left corner, and touch it to the top corner like so, and then back again, and then again, and then again. This nib ladder can be a little bit tricky at first, so you can also make a nib step where you step, corner to corner, step, corner to corner, step. It's a little difficult to judge where to start on the left side of the nib ladder, whereas on the step, you're always on the right side so you can see what you're doing. Be careful when you're using this technique because it is corner to corner, just touching. It is not overlapping. So if you see a little bit of darkened area, if you're using a color, a medium to light color, you know that you've made a mistake there. That is going to give you a false line height for the size of the letter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Italic is generally between 4 to 8. Usually 5 to 6 is a good height. I tend to go with even numbers because it's easier to produce angles that are more regular with even X height of nib width. So let's just do an A. And of course, the amazing thing about using these markers is, unlike a pen, you can push back on it and still get a line. You can push back on a nib, but it can sometimes catch and splatter a little bit. Thank you.